How to invent a religion.
I always knew you had to be willing to die to even do this job.
You can't stop what's coming. Executive orders.
The creation and the maintenance of a secret government within our government.
Is something wrong? With what? With anything?
I feel like you won't stand it. You rip your face off.
There's something wrong with everything.
I was so spun.
What's the most you ever lost in the coin toss?
The law of the jungle.
The most you ever lost in the coin toss?
You don't know what you're talking about. Who said it?
I said it. You don't know what you're talking about.
Suppression of unrest and dissent. Domestic anti-terrorism.
I don't have some way to put it. That's the way it is.
All right, Internet denizens, you know the ritual. Blackballed, Rollie Quaid right here on revisionmedia.org. And I got a big show for you tonight with a very special guest, Charles Giuliani. Charlie, how you doing?
Hey, not too bad.
Great to have you on my show. You know, we were at Renegade at the same time. You've been there much longer. You're gracious enough to actually let me on your show a couple of times, really throwing me a bone. And it was great for me because listening to your show, Truth Hertz, was a watershed moment for me. It's really influenced my life. And I joke with my friends, I'm a deep believer in Giuliani itself.
I didn't know that. Wow, that I'll tell you, that kind of thing there makes doing radio really worth it. I've had a lot of people tell me over the years, you know, I've opened their eyes, like, you know, to the Bible, to religion, and that's the reason I do it. You know, I want people to be set free, to have their mind set free. You can be physically bound, but if your mind is free, you're a free man. You know what I'm saying? To me, the mental freedom is more important than the physical even.
You've definitely drawn some connections that I would never normally connect myself. You know, people have the same amount of neurons, but not the same amount of connectors, you like to say. And it's really inspiring, your work. And it goes to show you, you know, you do conspiracies, not like contemporary, but actually ancient conspiracies. And the contemporary world is very much affected by the ancient world. Isn't that right, Giuliani?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. What we're seeing playing out now is just an old template that they've been using again and again and again. It's the same old game, same people.
I'm going to ask you something. I want to weave it into tonight's topic, but it's very, very relevant to tonight's topic. How was your Memorial Day, Giuliani?
Well, for me personally, it was okay, although I just found out today that my mother's best friend's husband died yesterday. Imagine that, on Memorial Day. So that wasn't too good. So I'm going to be going to the wake and funeral later this week. But yeah, no, it was pretty good. The weather was actually nice. We had a actually warm day, one of the few that we've had this whole year so far. Today is back to rainy and cold again. Like everything else, they're frigging that up too. This is not normal weather. And I understand it's pretty much that way every place else too, not just here in New England.
You brought up a very good point. For some people, Memorial Day is 3 days with dad barbecuing. And then for other people, it's a widow and her children grieving over her dad, their father, the man of the house, dying in Afghanistan and Iraq itself. And you have a friend that's grieving right now over Memorial Day. And it's sad, you know, that people are so insulated that they don't see the world as there's veterans out there that have been really brushed aside. There are 300,000 veterans waiting for health care, and 20 veterans actually commit suicide every day. And we still take the banner and wave it around like that actually means something. That's like really supporting the troops, right?
Right. Speaking of that, I got to share this. Actually, it was you, Rollie, that sent me this yesterday. I've been sending this to people all day. This thing is just mind-blowing. The tweet that he did yesterday, Trump.
Yeah, and actually, where I got that tweet was actually what started tonight's topic too, because Netanyahu, Benjamin Netanyahu's son, commented underneath Donald Trump's original comment, like, "Thank you, President Trump, for all you do for Israel." And then there was an American flag plus an Israeli flag. But definitely tell the audience with the link that I sent you, Giuliani.
Yeah, this is just so classic, and there's so many points to be brought out in just this short little 2-sentence, whatever. It should be 3 sentences, but the guy has poor grammar like George Bush Jr. used to have, so he didn't put his period where it belonged. But anyways, here's what he said. Hoping things will work out with Israel's coalition formation, and Bibi and I can continue to make the alliance between America and Israel stronger than ever. A lot more to do, he says, with an exclamation point. First of all, as you pointed out, where the hell is there any mention here? It would be bad enough if he mentioned U.S. servicemen who have died after mentioning Israel, but he didn't mention them at all. His only focus here is Israel and Israel's interests. Unbelievable. But notice how he says, he says, I'm hoping that the alliance between America and Israel will grow stronger than ever. A lot more to do. A lot more to do for what? To make the U.S. and Israel's alliance stronger? How could you make it any stronger than it is now? How could he kiss their hindparts any more than he's doing now? But he's talking about lots more to be done in that area. That should make your hair stand on end. Right there, if that doesn't wake people up to the fact that this guy is a sellout piece of garbage, nothing will. I don't want to give away my show coming up on Monday because I'm going to be continuing a 3-part, what is turning out to be a 3-part series on Trump. But there's a lot that's been emerging with his Russian connections. They are not to be ignored or brushed away. It's not speculation. It's not a theory. It's an absolute fact. And those Russian connections are, in fact, Judeo-controlled Jewish mafia Russian connections. The Russian mob. It's a Jewish enterprise. Just like the Italian mafia in this country. They run that too. They always have. When you talk Russian mafia, you're talking Jewish mafia. And he has gotten not only financial support from them, unquestionably, but they have also, they're the ones that hacked into the DNC's emails. You know, that whole email thing with Clinton that blew open? That was Russia. Russia. That was the Jewish Russian mob that did that. No question about it. The evidence is, I'll be presenting that this coming Monday. But again, it's not speculation. When the hearings were being conducted and the FBI director was asked about one of Trump's connections, one of his business partners, who has a long history of criminal activity, by the way. He was indicted a couple decades ago. What the hell's his name now? Oh, damn it. His name looked at my tongue. Starts with an S. He uses a fake name. It's not even his real name. He's a Russian Jew, a rabid Russian Jew. Anyway, the FBI director was asked about this guy, and he said, I'm not going to comment. And so he asked him another question about the same guy, and he responds with same answer. Well, why didn't the FBI want to comment? Because the FBI gave this guy amnesty because he promised, he did a plea bargain. So when they arrested him for this $40 million investment fraud scheme that he was involved in, he was going to go up the river for, 10, 20 years, right? He ratted all of his partners out. And so they not only let him off the hook, they covered up all the records of his trial, all of his past criminal record. And it turns out, right after this whole fiasco finished, he went right back to his criminal activities and still to this day is engaging in them. The FBI obviously knows this. They're doing nothing about it. They gave him the green light because he cooperated with them, and they're probably profiteering too off of his crimes. This is how it works. They don't care if you commit crimes as long as they can get in on the action and you're one of their yes men. You'll cooperate with them and provide them anything, information that they need, whatever. So, but that's why the FBI director wouldn't comment, because he would be implicating his own self. Never mind Trumpy boy. Oh, my God, man, it's unbelievable. This slippery-ass little bastard in the White House is going to wind up being worse than what I have been saying was our worst president in history, George Bush Jr. This guy's going to beat his record, I guarantee you. He pretty much already is.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. And he's an oligarch himself. And of course, he's in bed with other Jewish oligarchs himself. Donald Trump even actually said, I am Goy and I'm Jewish. So he's actually admitted that he's Jewish before.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
From his father's side. His
not only
not
ethnically, right, the name is Trump, but also, spiritually or religiously, he has officially converted to Judaism. I don't see why there was any need. He was already there anyway, in every other sense of the word. But as far as the religion goes, he has officially converted. There was an article in, what was it, IsraelTimes.com a few weeks ago about it, that he absolutely, no question, he's converted officially.
They also have Norman Vincent Peale, which was supposedly Donald Trump's pastor, and he was a rabid Zionist, and he was a Freemason, and he would always put on that little stupid viz that the Shiners would wear all the time. Did you ever see him in a picture of that?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Absolutely disgusting. And he's had the Chabad Lubavitch rabbis in the Oval Office. Of course, pretty much every president has for decades on end now. Yeah, no exception. He's had them there. And these meetings are always private, closed door. There's pictures that are taken, but, there's no disclosure as to what's discussed. You can just imagine what the hell must be going on in those meetings.
Yeah, absolutely.
If you were to capture and torture one of these bastards to get information, if you were to pick one person, it wouldn't be Bibi. It wouldn't be anybody in the Knesset or nobody in politics in Israel. They're just the middlemen. You need to get one of these Chabad, lube your bitch rabbis. Excuse me. Can you swear on this network?
Actually, there's a little bit more looser than Renegade.
Oh, okay. I'll try not to go too overboard, but sometimes you talk about this, you just can't help yourself. But these are the people that have the top information. They're the policy planners. These rabbis, these Lubavitch rabbis are the ones. You know that famous video? Did you ever see it? I mentioned this yesterday on my show. There's a video of Bibi going back to, I think it was in the mid-'90s. He's meeting with one of these top rabbis from Israel. I think he was a Lubavitcher. And they got the translation because, they're talking in Hebrew. But basically, it's like the Dark Lord from Star Wars talking to Darth Vader, He's telling Bibi, yes, great progress has been made. However, the Mashiach is not here yet. That's, of course, their anticipated world leader that's going to rule their utopian world government, right? The Messiah. He says Mashiach has not come yet. So obviously, there's more work that needs to be done. So he's patting him on the back. Yes, Bibi, you've done some good work. However, it's not enough. We need more. And so now Trump comes along and he declares Israel, Jerusalem is Israel's capital, moves the embassy there. Now he gives them the Golan Heights. He's doing what this rabbi wanted Bibi to do. But do you see who's calling the shots here? Who was the top dog in that conversation? It wasn't Bibi. Bibi was coming before this rabbi as an underling, taking orders. Holy shit. And these are the people that, average Jews think are godly. Just like Christians, they look up to their ministers. Oh, they're godly men. They are the most evil among them. They're pieces of shit. They wouldn't have that job if they weren't. Same with politicians, right? People look up to them. Oh, they got three-piece suits on. They're respectable individuals. They're scum of the earth. But if you want to get to the cream of the crop of all the scum, right there, baby, the Lubavitch rabbis, that's where it all starts right there. It all stems from them. They are the shot callers. Everybody else is their minions.
I wrote an article in May 2018, and you touched on it yesterday, too, on your show over at Renegade. The Melia coin with Donald Trump with King Cyrus together.
Oh, yeah. 2 coins they minted. 2 over in Israel. Yeah.
They minted it on the 70th anniversary of the state of Israel when they Nakba and they stole the land from the Palestinians themselves.
Right.
And denied that they actually existed at all.
Yeah.
Just mystery people that were there. I don't know how they got there, you know. But,
Pretty much every Israeli prime minister has made that comment that, Palestinians don't exist. What Palestinians? I don't know of any Palestinians. Comments to that effect, denying that they're even there.
They say that they had no currency ever. But then Michael Rivera did a immaculate thing where he actually showed like a Palestinian coin, and they actually had stamps. So there really was a state of Palestine before 1948.
Yeah, that's one thing he has done that's commendable. But, like I said, there's a lot of Jews who are, quote, anti-Zionists, but I always tell people, don't be too quick to jump on board with them. A lot of times it's just a facade. I'm not saying that there aren't sincere Jews that are against all of this, yes, but a lot of these things are actually Zio fronts, because what they really mean is when they say that they don't like the state of Israel, they, like Jesus, want the state of Israel to be religious, not secular. Then it's okay to oppress the Palestinians, as long as you're doing it in the name of Yahweh and following Moses. But if you do it from a secular standpoint, it's wrong in their estimation. You see what I'm saying?
Have you actually heard about the bill that's being passed by Kushner and Trump, a deal of the century? It's going to have a new Palestine where the Palestinians get the 40% or the 60% of the land on the West Bank, and the settlers are going to get 40%. So after Ramadan this year, there's not going to be a such thing as settlers anymore. It's going to be part of Israel. Have you been following that as well?
Isn't that a great deal for the Palestinians? Wow, that's just something they can't refuse, isn't it? Yeah,
that's how they pawn it off too.
What's that?
But that's how they pawn it off too. Like, it's the art of the deal. Make them a deal they can't refuse. Giuliani, did you ever watch that movie Casino with Robert De Niro and Joe Pesci? Do you remember that scene in that movie where they have a Japanese gambler in one of the hotels, and he takes the casino blind and takes a lot of money out, legitimately. And Robert De Niro's character pretended like his flight was canceled, so he stays in the hotel. That was actually in The Art of the Deal with Donald Trump. That's something that Donald Trump actually did in real life.
No kidding. No, I actually never saw that movie. That's interesting. I'll have to check that out.
Yeah, it's a classic. But let's go way back to the beginning. Was there a defined state of Israel? I know that there were kingdoms, but was there really in antiquity ever really a such thing in the modern modernity as the state of Israel before 1948?
Well, like everything else in the Bible, all you have is just, and that's where they trace it from. I mean, where else are they going to get that idea from? Their whole history, the King David, King Solomon, as I have mentioned before, and I'll be doing another series on this coming up on ancient Egypt. There are elements of truth to those stories. That's how their lies work. They'll always take a little bit of truth and mix it in with a lot of lies, or sometimes just a little bit of lies, but enough that it'll always lead you down the wrong road, having been lured in by the amount of truth that's there. There were rulers that fit the bill for, what's called King David, King Solomon, but they didn't reign in the Levant. They did not reign in what's called Israel today. No. These kings were actually Hyksos Egyptian kings. I'll be getting into that in coming weeks. There was never, ever an empire called Israel. There were people, a tribe called Israel that lived there, yes. And all they did is make cheap pottery, vessels, and raise cattle and sheep. They were Hyksos. The Hyksos were called shepherd kings, right? They were shepherds who became kings. Where did they become kings? In Israel, by hijacking a system that was already in place. They never had a kingdom of their own, though, in Israel. Modern archaeology confirms this. Even a lot of biblical scholars, they're very careful how they admit that, because they don't want to lose, their employment with their religious institutions and all of their followers that feed their pockets. But in tongue-in-cheek fashion, at least by default anyway. They don't argue in favor of state of Israel anymore openly. They're indirectly conceding that, well, yes, archaeology doesn't support that. It doesn't. Biblical Archaeology Review, even though it's a liberal publication, it's all fact-based. There's no arguing their conclusion that, there wasn't an established empire. If you read the Old Testament, not only was there a nation of Israel, it was an empire, and Solomon collected taxes from all of his vassal states. That's just bullshit. It never happened. Never. There's no archaeological evidence to substantiate any of it. The whole thing was invented in the wake of the release from Babylonian captivity. Our little tribal friends who did live in that region were constantly rebelling against every empire. Empires that they helped to fund with their, trading network. They made a lot of shekels then, the same way they do now, ripping people off. And so they would fund different empires, different emperors, to bring them to the throne, pin one empire against another, so it would overthrow that. And, and then later that empire that they helped to establish, they'd hire somebody else to come in and overthrow them, but never had their own kingdom. All they did, just as they do now, they just interfere with everybody else's kingdoms, manipulate them to their advantage. But no.
They coexisted
absolutely.
to a certain degree with the Canaanites and Hittites, too. So there's like a trio going on where they were overlapping. In some places, they would live in the same areas.
Right. Well, all they wanted was to occupy that area so they could monopolize the trade. And they did have such a monopoly in ancient times. But again, they never built an empire. They never even had the intelligence to do it. Anything that was ever done there on their behalf was done by foreign nations. They used the Babylonians to build them a temple. Not the Babylonians, the Assyrians, and the Persians, to build them or rebuild them the temple after the Babylonians had destroyed the initial one. There was a building there that was used as a temple, but guess what? They never built it. The Egyptians did. Initially, the temple that they first had, called the Temple of Solomon, which I'll be getting into in the coming show, was actually built by Akhenaten, Pharaoh Akhenaten, who clearly was the biblical Moses, and I'll be getting into the reasons for that. There's 1,000,001. Unquestionable. The biblical record matches up completely with that Pharaoh. The biblical record of Moses matches up perfectly. So again, what they did is they took actual historical figures, gave them a facelift, gave them a new name, and invented their own history over in the Levant when it actually took place in Egypt. But they wanted to cover that up because that would reveal their game plan. They don't want people ever to know that they were ruling Egypt for centuries on end, not just with the main Hyksos occupation. They ruled Egypt actually even before the official Hyksos occupation, several centuries before that. I'm going to get into that on the coming show. And they ruled it again later after the Hyksos were expelled. The Egyptians didn't kick them all out. They only kicked out the leaders. They didn't anticipate that the lower level Hyksos were going to rise up and do the same thing, but they got smart. They didn't keep their names. They changed their names to Egyptian names. Doesn't that sound familiar? How many times have they done that before? And so because of that, they were able to weasel their way into the throne again. What's that?
Oh, I was saying going crypto.
Yeah, exactly. So they did that through what's called the Amarna pharaohs. Not just Akhenaten, his father. And even before him, you had Amenemhotep and, the third. These people were foreigners. They were called enemies by the Egyptians. They didn't necessarily recognize them as Hyksos. They weren't sure probably exactly who they were until later. Once they expelled Akhenaten, they started looking into his past and realized, oh my God, they did it to us again. But they did know that they were foreigners and that they illegitimately gained the throne by pulling a bunch of fiascos. And I'll be documenting that, like I said, in the coming show. But Akhenaten and his predecessor, his father, were Hyksos. So this was the third attempt at ruling Egypt. They did it for a time until the Egyptians got wise to him, kicked him out. Oh boy, did they kick him out. 3 times the Egyptians had to do this. But what a role model for us today. You know, I wish people would learn lessons from the Egyptians. They got wise to them. 3 times they kicked them out. That didn't stop them, though. It just held them back for a while. Generations later, they were at it again by using the Nubians as mercenary forces to invade Egypt on their behalf. And a Hyksos king didn't rule Egypt then, but they had a Nubian king sitting on the throne in Egypt in their place that they supported financially, backed him up, got him in there. And so he was ruling Egypt on their behalf. So in that sense, they pulled it again. So you could say that a 4th time they had done this to Egypt. Egypt's entire history from about 2300 BC on, if not before that, but definitely from 2300 on, they had wreaked centuries worth of havoc in Egypt over and over and over. Constantly, Egypt had to battle. That's where almost all of their troubles came from, just like today for us. Almost all of our troubles in this country, precious few exceptions, in fact, come from this same damnable tribe. Thousands of years of history to educate us as to what these people are like and to be on the watch for them. But no, people just don't pay attention to history at all. Very sad.
No, they don't. They just worry about their office job, like you mentioned, their little cubicle. They keep it in a little stable. And when they go to church, they're part of a flock, and they got a pastor, which pastorizes them. Absolutely amazing, And they refer to themselves as the children of God. How patronizing is that term, children of God? Why don't they think and feel like adults? Why do they give in to these these tall tales? I've even heard the argument with Bill Cooper. He's claimed that the Bible was a collection of stories that happened to the Semitic people at different times, kind of like a 1001 Arabian Nights sort of scenario, where it was merely a collection. And it came from different civilizations, different times. And like you mentioned, that really hits the nail in the head, the fact that we cannot prove that King David or King Solomon did exist, and there's no single relic that has emerged from that. But we could look at these Egyptians and
just to be clear, there was, and who knows if this was fake or not, but this is accepted by academia across the board. There was a stone fragment, and I mean just a piece of crappy stone, nothing high quality. They never produced anything of note, nothing worthy of the museums of the world. You know what I mean? But they found a real crappy quality stone with some scratching on it, which said House of David on it. Now, if that is in fact a real artifact, and I have no problem with it being real, it might be, but it doesn't mean anything because it identifies a local, what you would expect to have been there, a local tribal leader, a shepherd leader, a shepherd king, if you will, just a local chieftain. Not an emperor of a mighty empire the way the Bible portrays it. And no nation of Israel, just small, local, scattered tribes in the desert. That's all this was. Later, they took the story of an Egyptian king, a Hyksosian Egyptian king, and made up this story of David who reigned in the Levant. Complete horseshit. But, when you say there was no David, you got to be careful because somebody might throw that at you. What do you mean? We found this House of David thing. Yeah, well, it doesn't say what they want it to say. But they've never found anything with the name Solomon. In fact, the name Solomon is just it's a label. It's not even a name. Obviously, the name is a composite. On was the ancient name for the city of Heliopolis, the city of the sun, right? And Saul, of course, is the ancient name for the sun itself. So, it's just a composite name.
It's right there.
What's that?
I even heard it's the collection of 3 different sun god names. Sol, Men, all together in one word.
Yeah. And why the solar imagery? Well, the ancient Hebraic religion was a sun worship religion. you can see evidence of that all throughout the Old Testament, where Yahweh is likened to a bright sun, the bright sun shining in the heavens, blah, blah, blah. He rides his chariot. The solar deity was always depicted as riding his chariots across the sky, But the fact that one of Yahweh's names is Adonai in the Hebrew, when you transliterate that into Egyptian, you get, instead of Adon, you get Aton or Aton. There you go, the Aton, and that's where Moses came through with his one God, right? The original Hebrew religion was not one God. It was multiple gods with Yahweh as the chief deity, henotheism. I did a whole show on that one time talking about how originally the Hebrews did believe in a multiplicity of gods. And they never gave up the idea of worshiping other gods all through their history. They always did it because it was so ingrained in them. It was hard for them to give up their multiple deities. But anyway, when Moses came along, he tried to abolish that and introduce this worship of the one true God now, the only God, Aton or Adonai. It's the same thing. It's the same God of Akhenaten, who was the sun deity, right? The parallels, you just can't miss them.
Giuliani, it looks like we got a caller. I want to ask you one question that's been itching me, and then I'm going to let the caller on the line.
Sure.
So the Mount Zion, it's never been proven exactly where it is. And that's where the covenant between God and Abraham was. And it's based on a sun cult. The name of the Babylonians called it the Sun as well. Is that correct?
Right. Like most everything else, they stole that from the Babylonians. Like I said, the New Testament, the Old Testament was written right after the Babylonian captivity. So it's only natural that they would have picked up a lot of ideas from the Babylonians. Their creation story is right out of the code of, the Epic of Gilgamesh, the story of Noah and the flood. Even the Sabbath itself comes from a Babylonian word, Sabbat, where the Babylonians actually every seventh day they had like a holy day. It was a day of rest, a day to honor the gods. Well, it was every seventh day of any given month. So the seventh day of this month and the 14th day, you know what I'm saying? And then when the next month began, it would start afresh, the seventh day of that month. So it wasn't every 7 days like we have now, irrespective of the days of the month. You know what I mean? But nevertheless, the idea of a holy day being on a seventh day came from the Babylonians, and even the name for it, Sabbat, comes from the Babylonians. But as far as where Mount Zion was, well, that's an interesting story because the Temple Mount is considered to be Mount Zion. No, it's not. Absolutely not. The only place in Jerusalem where you could say a temple once stood, where there were priests that officiated, is located a quarter of a mile south of the Temple Mount. It's been excavated. They found, remnants of flooring where there were holes in the floor where they would have shackles to hold the sacrificial animals. They found golden bells that used to dangle from the priest's robe. Lavers where they would put the blood of the animals. And interestingly, right nearby was the fountain of Gihon, as it was called, which this natural spring of water would come up, and they had this like sewer system built into the temple. Well, they didn't build it, of course. They had others build it for them with other people's money too. But anyway, they had this elaborate sanitation system where the water from this spring would run through the temple, and so they could easily wash the blood away from the thousands of animals that was sacrificed on a daily basis therein. But that's where this temple was. It wasn't ever built by someone named Solomon. The first one was built by Akhenaten. They have found Egyptian relics in that area, in the area of modern day Israel. So there's no question there was Egyptian presence there. And we know there was from the Amarna letters. Akhenaten had gone in there and defeated some Canaanites, and that's where the tribe came in now and took over their land once the Hyksos king, which was their brother, right, once he came in and ousted the Canaanites, they stole their land and occupied it. It wasn't an empire called Israel. It was a vassal state of Egypt that Egypt conquered on their behalf for them and built them a temple. But in any case, the temple, often called the Temple of Solomon, it wasn't. It was the Temple of Akhenaten, but whatever. That temple was there, but it was not on the Temple Mount. They want the Temple Mount because a foreign entity called Islam is laying claim to that piece of real estate. They do not tolerate anybody else owning what they claim is theirs. They want them out. And they don't care if it will mean a war. After all, it won't be them fighting the war, will it? It'll be us fighting it. Trump, if you ask me, is going to be the one to do this. And that's the plan. I don't know if you heard my show last night, but I was talking about...
I actually called it. I did.
Oh, was that you that was on the line? I didn't notice until just as the show was ending. I didn't even look to see.
No, I thought that you wouldn't do a show yesterday because it was Memorial Day. So I was browsing Renegade Broadcasting. I saw that there was a show there, and I listened to it a couple hours later.
Oh,
but
okay.
I was listening to another radio show at this network. Looks like we got Johnny on the line. Johnny, I'm hoping you'll ask him a good question, and maybe we could get into the Wailing Wall a little bit. Johnny, are you there, buddy?
Yes, sir. Thank you. I have a few questions, but just a simple one. When you're talking about the Roman history and the Egyptians and the Holy Land of Jerusalem,
yeah,
you were talking about how it was, how it's been changed many times. I agree with that. And the Bible and all that, it's all a bunch of made up stuff. The question would be, do you think Jesus was a Jew as such the Bible said? Because I agree the Bible has been written many times, but I guess if we were just to take it slow on this, Jesus was considered a Jew when he was born. He was born in Bethlehem, 10 kilometers away from Israel.
Yeah, all he was a rebel. He was a rebel. He was a rebel Jew. In fact, there's no difference between him and the umpteen other messianic claimants of the first century, all of which were rebels who wanted to not only overthrow Rome, kick Rome out, and ultimately overthrow the entire Roman Empire. They launched uprisings not just in Judea, they launched them in Rome itself. But they also wanted the Pharisees overthrown because the Pharisees were compromising, in their estimation anyway, with the Romans, and they were part of the problem. They were corrupt, they weren't following Moses. Jesus was all about following Moses, which amazes me because, people who follow Jesus, if they really look at Moses, he was an evil, tyrannical, militaristic bastard. Again, most of those stories are fairy tales, but it doesn't matter. They believe they're real. Okay, so just for the sake of argument, let's pretend they're real. If they're real, then they're holding on a high pedestal, as Jesus did, a mass murdering guerrilla warfare prick. You know what I'm saying? But yes, Jesus was a Jew. I mean, go by what the New Testament says, he was considered a son of David. So he was an heir to David's throne. You can't get more Jewish than that.
Yeah, I understand that. When you were talking about the religion of everything that was happening in the Middle East, we forget to remind ourselves, I think you brought this up, but it is true. We used to go based off of the Egyptian calendar, which is considered the sun religion. And then we slowly converted to the Roman calendar. I think it was 48 BC, Julius Caesar, he implemented
Julian
that.
calendar. Yeah.
Yeah. But if we were to put that history together as the clues that you're speaking about, it's really just all a bunch of fables.
Oh, yeah.
And it's really, I believe you guys blame the Jews, and that's all right. I agree with a lot of what you said, but I really believe it's the Catholic Roman Church, and you could see this with
guess what? Guess what?
And stuff.
There's a lot of debate that people have. Is it the Jews? Is it the Jesuits? But what I've been pointing out for years on my show is that the Catholic Church is a branch of Judaism. There were two families that have been calling the shots down through the centuries, and they're both Jewish bloodlines. You have what's called the royal bloodline, right? They comprised, the kings of Europe, the emperors of Europe, all through the Middle Ages. They were all tied in. To this day, the royal family, and that carries over even into our presidency here in the United States. They are interrelated. This is a fact. This is well documented. Every U.S. president has been interrelated with every other U.S. president, and they've all been related, tied over to the British bloodline, the royal bloodline. That royal bloodline goes back to at least to the time of the Merovingians. Well, it goes back before that, but as far as European kings go, they have been controlling European thrones all through the centuries. And then the other half of the bloodline is what's called the priestly or the Cohenim bloodline. They were the ones that established the Catholic Church to use that as a means to control people as well from on the religious front. And so here's what happened. In the Middle Ages, around the 14th century, a new system arose. I call it the third faction of Judaism now. This was the secret societies like Freemasonry and the Templars, right? They got fed up. They were all Jews, but they got fed up with the other two factions because they were vying for power against each other, very often fighting against each other and making a mess of everything, and they weren't making any real progress toward world government. People were fed up with the Catholic Church and its corruption. They were fed up with the kings and queens of Europe. So this third faction came along, the secret societies, and they said, we can do it much better. We're going to do it through the power of money, and we're going to do it underhandedly by, not being so open like the church or the state. We're going to be doing it behind the scenes so people won't know it. They won't perceive it, and they won't be so resistant against us like they are with you, the kings and the popes, right? Well, you can just imagine the popes didn't want that, and the kings didn't want it. So now the popes and the kings of Europe band together instead of fighting against each other. Now they have a common enemy that's vying with them for control. So the pope conspired mostly with the king of France at the time to go hunt down all the Knights Templar. And they did. They hunted them down. They killed them. They illegalized the Knights Templar because they realized now what they were trying to do. That didn't stop them, though. It just drove them further underground, and it caused them to create a multiplicity of other secret societies, all operating under the same, with the same goals, but under different names. So it seemed like a bunch of different groups. It was much harder to hunt them down now. Do you see what I'm saying? They have succeeded. Today, even though there are still royal families, they're just there for public show. They don't serve any function anymore. The same thing with the popes. The popes don't have any real power anymore. Just like our president doesn't have any real power. They're all puppets now. The Vatican has been completely infiltrated by Freemasonry. The P2 Lodge runs the Vatican. I'll admit, you're right. The Vatican is incredibly evil, and it does exert a powerful influence on people, a very dangerous one. But who's controlling it? That's the question. It's your secret societies. And who created them? Once again, our friends, the Jews. Masonry is as Jewish as you can get. I mean, it's all built around Solomon's temple, the imagery of Solomon's temple, right? Well, where the hell do you think that came from? What's that?
I said, founding fathers agree upon that.
Yeah, well, guess what?
The Constitution, Judeo-Christian
founding fathers were Masons themselves, I hate to tell you. And this is another thing I brought out on my show. I don't know if you're familiar with, the great revolutions that have been occurring in the past several centuries, the French Revolution, the Russian Revolution, the Germanic revolutions of 1848 all across Europe. All of these were staged by the Judeo-Freemasonic crowd, right? That's well documented. It's absolute fact. But what most people don't realize is the American Revolution, which was taking place while all these other ones were either happening or in the process of happening, they were being planned. The French Revolution was just after the American Revolution. The American Revolution was also staged by Freemasons. George Washington was a high-level Freemason. Do you know what he said in his diary? What we have built here is an empire in its infancy. He actually said that. Do you suppose George Washington knew exactly what he was doing? Of course he did. And he did it with glee. He served his Masonic fraternity quite well. Which is very pathetic because a lot of Christians believe that this country was founded on Christian principles. Not that that would matter because Christianity is a Jewish creation too. But it's a Masonic creation. The founders were not Christian. None of them were. They sometimes use Christian rhetoric because they knew the bulk of their supporters were Christian, just like our presidents do today, none of which are Christians either. They were deists is what they were. Well, that's what Masons are. They're deists. They believe in a God. They believe in the Jewish evil God called Adonai or Atonai or Aton, who is a fire-breathing dragon, if you read the Bible carefully. The God of the Bible is not a loving, caring, holy entity. He's the devil in disguise. He's pure evil, absolutely evil. Everything we've been sold in this world is a lie, my friend, everything. Whether it's religion, whether it's the government, whether it's the media, the education system, everything we've been told is an absolute lie. It's taken me the past several decades to unlearn everything that I learned in the first couple decades of my life. It's all BS, all of it. You still there, Colin?
I agree. I didn't want to interrupt Mr. Quaid, but yeah, I did have a question to continue on with that.
Oh, okay. Well, first of all, did you have something to say, Rollie? First,
Yeah, I was going to say, Johnny, I hope we're not running too much roughshod on your feelings. I feel like this is something that you need to hear.
No,
yeah, this is tough stuff to gnaw on here.
Something to gnaw on, not necessarily. Yeah. Go ahead, Johnny. Ask your next question.
When it comes back to the ancient Middle East times and Jerusalem and Israel, the conflict and everything, we're talking about the Catholic Church. During that time when you were talking about that, you were saying that the Egyptians and all that. What is your point of opinion when it came to Alexander the Great Library and then the Catholic Church supposedly burned it down, but they took a lot of the books?
Oh, yeah. I've done a show on that. They actually did destroyed. All they did was destroy the physical building. But beforehand, they looted all the documents and secreted them away. Those documents still exist today. I bet some of them, if not all of them, are in the Vatican. They're right there in the Vatican archives.
That's what they say they are. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
That's what I'm asking. Yeah.
They've been hiding a lot of things from us. I've talked about an ancient document from India called the Mahabharata, which talks about advanced technology in ancient times. It's fascinating. Only 1/10 of it has ever been translated and released to the public. Where's the other 90%? How come we're not being told about it? Well, it turns out that the Manhattan Project, that created supposedly the first atomic bomb, they obviously had access to that other 90%. And I think that was used as a basis for their research in that whole project. One of its top scientists, Robert Oppenheimer, was a Sanskrit scholar. And when he was asked, how does it feel to be part of the first scientific team to develop an atomic bomb? You know what he said? Well, the first in modern times, anyway. Isn't that interesting?
He also read from the Veda itself, and he says, I have become
the destroyer of worlds. That was a
worlds.
Yeah. Oh, I tell you, history comes to life in ways you could never imagine. Once you know who the string pullers are, and the kind of games they've been playing. I mentioned the Catholic Church being run by the Jews. Let me just give you some examples. There have been many popes down through the centuries. The Medici family, for example, they were powerful financiers in Italy. They produced at least half a dozen popes. Then there was the Borgia family. That was another Jewish family, a Spanish Sephardic Jewish family. They produced another dozen or so popes. One of those popes was Alexander the Sixth. He was Pope at the time of the Spanish Inquisition. Now, a lot of people will argue, he couldn't have been Jewish because the Spanish Inquisition targeted Jews. Why would a Jew help to create the Spanish Inquisition, targeted Jews? Oh, but that's because they don't understand the mindset. They go after their own people when it suits their interest. Let's look at what happened after the Spanish Inquisition. It forced the Jewish population to leave Spain. That's exactly what the elite Jews wanted, because do you know where most of those Jews wound up that left Spain? They either went to Amsterdam, which was where the big Jewish banking enterprise was headquartered at the time, so a lot of them went to work for that bank. Some of them went down to Morocco, where they had a big headquarters for piracy set up, which was exempt from the Inquisition. The Inquisition wasn't allowed to go there, so they could conduct their corrupt practices of hijacking ships and sinking them and stealing all the booty, right? But the bulk of them wound up in Jamaica. Do you know what Jamaica was at that time? Mr. Columbus was a Jew. believe it or not. He was a Sephardic Jew, Cristobal Colon.
He was
Colon
funded, yeah.
family. Yeah, it was a big Jewish family. Well, when he came over across the Atlantic, before he left on that journey, the advisor to King Ferdinand, who was a Jew himself, his name was Sant'Angelo, right? He told Columbus, what you need to do tomorrow when you come before the king, I'm going to arrange it that he calls you back, because the king turned him down at first. Sant'Angelo talked the king into calling him back. He says, when you go tomorrow, tell the king that you will undertake this project for him only if he allows you to pick any island of your choosing that you discover, that you can settle there with your family and your friends, right? And that it'll be exempt from the Inquisition, just like Morocco. Well, guess what? That's exactly what happened. Right after Columbus's journey, he declared, this sovereign territory that the Inquisition was not allowed to go to. And a lot of the Jews from Spain went there. They set up a big base of operation for piracy. They hijacked a lot of the Spanish Armada ships coming back from the Americas, loaded with gold and silver and jewels, right? Sank the ships, took the booty. The Spanish Armada ultimately went belly up because of these piracy operations that were exempt from the Inquisition. The Spanish government itself went along with the scheme to exempt these islands. Can you imagine? These guys are unbelievable. And here they are. They've got our country using our military to defend Israel and attack Israel's enemies. And now Trump declares Jerusalem the capital of Israel. He gave them the Golan Heights, potentially setting up World War III. We're posed to go to war with Iran. For who? For Israel. Do you see the same thing happening? They hijack nations. They twist kings' interests, whether the king is a Jew or not. They get him to go along by handling big piles of shekels, or threatening him. We got a lot of power in this world. If you don't go along with us, you're going to be a dead man, and we're going to kill your whole family too. Oh, okay, what do I sign? Do you see that it's the same game? So if anybody ever tells you the Jews couldn't have arranged the Spanish Inquisition against Jews, oh, well, now you know why they did it. Now you know why. They did the same thing, by the way, in World War II with Hitler. Hitler was used by them big time. He was funded by Jews. He wouldn't have ever gotten into power except by Jews. And once in, he served them very well. Oh, they'll have you believing they hate him. No. Whenever they say something, they mean the opposite of what they say. They're colossal liars. They love Hitler. You know why? Because Hitler expelled a lot of Jews from Germany. And you know where they wound up ultimately? In the Middle East, baby, so that they could overawe the Arab population and drive them out and set up the state of Israel. There's actually a book written by a Jew. His name is Black, where he documents this whole thing. How
was it Adolf Hitler, the founder of the state of Israel? Is that the one you're referring to?
Yeah, something like, I forget the title of it now. The transfer agreement. That's it. The transfer agreement. I think what you cited is the subtitle or whatever. But anyway, Hitler had these bronze medals minted. I have a friend that collects Nazi paraphernalia. He's got one. It has the swastika on one side and the friggin' Star of David on the other, showing the partnership that was going on. They loved this guy. And then after the war, they made up this bullshit story about the Holocaust, right? So they could demonize Germany and kick Germany in the dust. And to this day, Germany is still getting kicked in the dust. They're being made to still pay reparation payments to Israel for something that never even fucking happened. And even if it did, nobody alive in Germany today was even fucking alive back then that's paying these debts. Can you imagine this horse shit? I hope I didn't lose you, caller.
Oh, okay. No. I'm totally listening. I'm agreeing with everything you're saying. A lot of people don't understand the Spanish Acquisition. He was funded by Jewish people, but he was using the Spanish Queen's ship. A lot of people don't realize that. They say, well, he was funded by the Spanish Queen. Well, he was using Spanish ships, but the Jews were funding all that. After all, they always use
other people's money, other people's resources, other people's armies to do their bidding, and like blind sheep, they go right along. They never question. They don't realize their leaders are either Jewish themselves or at least sold out to the Jewish agenda because they've been bribed or threatened to go along with the schemes, and nothing has changed. Over 4,000 years of this kind of crap has been going on, and now we're about to see this country go belly up because of it. They've been sucking on us like a parasite, and soon they're going to kick us to the curb once they get, what they want from us. And what they want from us is to defend their interests in the Middle East so they can set themselves up as the uncontested masters of the world with U.S. arms and U.S. money funding the whole operation. Why the hell do you think we went into Iraq? Why do you think we went into Afghanistan? These are countries that not only had important resources that they wanted to hijack, but Iraq particularly was a big threat to Israel in the Middle East. Syria was, until the CIA came along and sabotaged the whole thing and, created ISIS as an excuse to go in and bomb the Christ out of that country. Iran now is the next one in their crosshairs because it's another big threat to Israel in the Middle East.
They actually found ISIS.
What's that?
In Afghanistan.
No, go ahead, Rollie.
What were you saying, Johnny? They put a face behind that?
I said, how do you put a face behind that? Yes, we could say Bibi Netanyahu, but he's almost the puppet, as you mentioned. Who do we put the blame? Who do we really go after? I agree with a lot of what you're saying.
Well, as I was saying,
really convinced me of a lot.
A lot of the shots are being called by Chabad Lubavitch rabbis. They really are.
It's a council. It's a council. It's like Lord of the Rings. Not one man should hold one ring. So they spread out the power. Like, for example, at Las Vegas, they have a graveman empire of 12, and they run the whole strip. When one of them die, they replace it with another guy. So there's different power chambers that they all tend to share, and it's a way to balance it out and not have a straw man, but more like a council of the elders, if you will.
Right.
More so.
Well, I mean, yeah, you look at the protocols of the learned elders of Zion, right? That's their blueprint. That's what they've been using and following to a T. Who drafted that up? Rabbis. The people that even your average Jews that don't know better look up to as godly men, they are the most evil of all. Just like a lot of Christians, they look up to their religious leaders. Very often, those religious leaders, there are some that are sincere that don't know better, sure, but not at the highest levels. The leaders at the highest levels of any given church, they're the most evil ones of all. I know this from my personal experience. I was a frickin' theology major at one point. So I've dealt with these people firsthand. It's not just my research. I know how they are because I've seen them in action. They act much differently when you get them behind closed doors when you're working within the system than they do with the average lay people, Get to see them for what they really are.
Hey, Giuliani, I'm going to let you take that break. We're approaching the second hour.
Oh, yeah. I'm going to grab a water.
Go ahead, sir. You're listening to Blackballed, Rollie Quaid, and we're talking about, is it unique? Is there a master race known as the Jews? Are they a unique ancient race themselves, despite the fact that there's no proof of King David or King Solomon, even any record or relic to actually prove that? And we'll be back in the next hour with Blackballed with Rollie Quaid right here on revisionmedia.org. We'll be back briefly, people.
How to invent a religion.
I always knew you had to be willing to die to even do this job.
Yeah, he's a psychopathic killer, but so what? Just playing him around.
What is the first and principal thing he does? What needs does he serve by killing?
Executive orders.
The creation and the maintenance of a secret government within our government.
Okay. I'll be part of this world.
I feel like you want to just rip your face off.
I was so spun.
Is something wrong? With what? With anything?
Is that what you're asking me? Is there something wrong with anything?
What would be anything else?
You already asked me that.
Well, dark get dark.
You don't know what you're talking about, sir. I said, you don't know what you're talking about. What time do you go to bed, sir? You're a bit deaf, aren't you? I said, what time do you go to bed?
Somewhere around 9:30. I'd say around 9:30.
I could go back then.
Why would you be coming back? Did they close?
Can you say that? What's the most you ever lost in the coin toss?
Sir,
The most you ever lost in the coin toss?
I don't know. I couldn't say.
You can't see the eyes of the demon until him come calling.
Call it.
Oh, yes. For what?
Just call it.
Well, we need to know what we're calling for here.
You need to call it. I can't call it for you. It wouldn't be fair.
I didn't put nothing out.
Yes, you did. You've been putting it out your whole life. Just didn't know. You know what date is on this coin? 1958. It's been traveling 22 years to get here. And now it's here. And it's either heads or tails. And you have to say coin.
Well, look, I need to know what I stand to win.
Everything.
How's that?
You stand to win everything. Call it.
All right. Heads, then.
Well done.
Suppression of unrest and dissent. Domestic anti-terrorism.
The law of the jungle.
Open your mind. Open your mind. Open your mind. Open your
I don't have some way to put it. That's the way it is. You've been putting it out your whole life. 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 You've been putting it out your whole life.
can't stop what's coming. They ain't all waiting on you.
All right, we're back. Blackballed, Rollie Quaid. This is the second hour, the witching hour, the final hour. I'm going to give you the phone lines. They're open. If you want to pick Charles Giuliani's brain, this is your final chance to do so. That call number is 855-492-6049. Charles, I got to ask you a question about Adolf Hitler. Is there any possibility that Adolf Hitler was not funded by Jewry itself, but actually the elites in Germany itself, and it was really a conspiracy of self?
Yeah, I tried to hang on to that idea. I tried to see if there was any salvaging the guy, but the more I looked into it, he had one family in particular that went back to even before the Pooch era that he was very, very close with. I think it was Bernstein. I'd have to look it up again now, but they were a merchant family, very, very wealthy. And, they helped support that whole thing. And then there's just too many problems. He had connections with FDR. He had connections with Winston Churchill. It looks like it was the good old boys club. Then there is a lot of evidence that he did in fact escape Germany, that he was sent, that he went to Argentina and that he lived the rest of his days out there. There's even FBI memos to that effect, that it was known that he was there. That's just the kind of world we live in. There's too many things that just don't add up. He definitely did have, he was dependent on Jewish-run manufacturers in this country to provide, amongst other things, ball bearings. Oil. A lot of the oil that he got came from Rockefeller-owned companies, which, Standard, which of course is a Jewish family as well. The original name is Roggenfelder. They changed it later and took on this Baptist cloak to hide their, as they've always done through the centuries, so it's not known. Even the Roosevelts, their original family name is Rosenfeld. Rosenfeld, that's it. So they also tried to but what a thinly veiled disguise that is, because that whole family, going back to the 19th century, were heavily involved in Wall Street banking, and all he ever did when he was in office was benefit his big banking Jewish buddies. He established the Emergency Banking Relief Act of March 9th, 1933, which to me was the biggest, red flag right there that should have immediately called for his impeachment. Here was this country in the midst of this terrible economic overturn, right? Because of the 29 crash and the ensuing depression. The people who needed emergency relief were the American people, not the friggin' banks that orchestrated the whole damn thing in the first place, right? But nevertheless, he created the Emergency Banking Relief Act, and as part of that, the American people were required to hand over all of their privately owned gold, unless you owned, rare coins or something. But other than that, all privately owned gold was to be handed over to the Federal Reserve. And then, initially nobody complained because, well, at least we're going to be paid for it, right? You were handed what the current value was in cash. But then the little bastard turned around. Now, that would have been bad enough, because even though you got paid in cash is shit, right? Cash is worth, just like today, it wasn't much different then. Gold has real value. Cash doesn't, right? But to make, to add insult to injury, he turned around less than a year later and devaluated the American currency by 59%, just by fiat, emergency executive order. He declared that the American dollar was only worth 41% of its value. So all that money that people traded their gold in for just lost 61% of its, 61% of its value. Unfreaking believable.
Absolutely incredible. And we're talking about a tribal gang itself that's lineage is by blood itself. And I want to get back to the topic itself at hand, like the foundation of Israel. What happened on Zion with Abraham? Was it an oath between like blood with God and Jehovah, or deeds? Well, what exactly transpired, when God gave a covenant to Abraham and for many nations to come after him?
Yeah, that's another thing I've got coming up in my show. It all began with this bastard. And I don't have any doubt that such an individual did exist. He was powerfully wealthy. He got rich like his buddies of today, his offspring of today get rich, through ill-gotten wealth, sleazing people out of their money with, scoundrelous trading tactics. Anyway, as rich as he already was, the bulk of his wealth came from the Egyptians. And that's how the whole thing started. And again, I don't want to give away my whole show, but what he did was establish the precedent for what the Hyksos would continue on with. Hijacking Egypt. He knew Egypt had a great deal of wealth. You know how he did it? And again, I marvel that so many people, so many Gentiles, Christians, look up to this guy as a great hero, a great character model, when in fact he was an absolute piece of shit. He told his wife, Sarah, to lie and say that she was his sister, okay? And he actually threatened her. This is all in the Old Testament. He told her, if you truly love me, you will do this. So he conned her into going along with this scheme. Tell the Pharaoh you're my sister. And he said the reason for that is if the Pharaoh knows that you're my wife, he might kill me so he can have you as his own. Because supposedly she was supposed to be really pretty.
She was also like 1,400 years old, right?
Yeah, right. But here's the thing. The whole story he told is an obvious, blatant, in-your-face lie, because later, the person or people who wrote this story were too stupid to even realize how dumb it is. But I guess they didn't really care that the story is an obvious fuck-up, because they realized that people are going to follow whatever their leaders tell them, whatever their ministers or rabbis tell them. People never look at these stories to see for themselves that these people are pieces of shit that they're being told to look up to and emulate. And Pharaoh later came to Abraham and was upset with him and told him, why did you not tell me this was your wife? I would never have taken her as my own if you told me that she was your wife. Why did you lie to me? So the whole story that Abraham made up, he'll kill me if he finds out you're my wife, was bullshit, wasn't it? Obviously. But yet we're supposed to believe that God was leading this guy and inspired him to lie. Yes, he lied, but he did it for a higher cause. God, no, obviously not. Well, guess what? That's not the first time this happened. And why did it happen? Because Pharaoh slept with her, impregnated her, and later, obviously, now, according to the biblical story, it tells us that Isaac was born, years and years later. No, bullshit. I'll argue that Isaac was the actual son of Pharaoh, and that later Abraham went back to Pharaoh and said, hey, guess what? My wife's son is your kid. He's of royal blood. You now owe us a lot of money. You got to protect your son's interests. Not only did this bring him a lot of shekels, right? But it got him a foot in the royal court of Egypt. How do you like them apples? This is where the Hyksos royal bloodline began. How they could lay claim and weasel their way in because they could show their papers that they had, and this is what they did every century thereafter, right? In country after country, everywhere they went, they would marry into the royal family, right? Or they would present papers to show that there already was that bloodline. It's the same bloodline that continues today, same bloodline that dictates who becomes president, dictates who becomes prime minister, whatever. So, but that's not the first time it happened. You read the storyline in Genesis, the son of a bitch did it again. Several decades later, he said the same thing, or I think it was just a decade later, whatever. He had his wife prostituted out to, this time it was, a Philistine king. Prostituted her out, told the same frickin' lie, and so she got pregnant with him, and now he got his foot in the door with that nation. Well, guess what? The next generation, Isaac comes along. Isaac did the same damn thing with the same lie. He prostituted his wife out to the same king, I might add, the Philistine king, and told the same lie was his sister when it was really his wife. His father taught him well, didn't he? But do you see how, biblically speaking, as a Christian, if you're dealing with Christians, tell them this story and ask them, how could you possibly say that these people were being led by an all-wise and all-loving God when this son told the same lie, which backfired on his father, pissed off the Pharaoh, right? Obviously, that wasn't inspired by God. So why is his son doing this now, a generation later, the same damn thing? Because they're sleazy bastards who realized, hey, it worked the first time, let's try it again. It brought us a lot of money and influence in Egypt, let's do it again. And they did. And then from there, it was just all downhill, wasn't it? That's how the Hyksos got their foot in the door, and they wreaked untold havoc for generations to come, for centuries to come after that. You know, I read on one of my shows a couple of years ago, and when I was talking about this, a document called the Papyrus of Ippur. Ippur was a man that lived at the time of the Hyksos occupation in Egypt. And he describes the conditions in Egypt at that time. And oh my God, when you read it, I couldn't believe when I first read this. I'm like, you've got to be shitting me. Wow, this is like reading modern headlines. He says, I walk the streets of my own country and scarcely do I find anyone who speaks Egyptian. What does that sound like? They had illegal immigration going on then, too, to dilute the population, just like they're doing with us in so many other countries around the world right now. He said, there is no shortage of skilled workers in my country, and yet there are almost no jobs available. You gotta be friggin' kidding me.
I'm dying to hear the story of Joseph Giuliani.
Oh, yes. Well, there you go. We can actually nail down who this guy was. There was a vizier called Yuya, who was absolutely one of the shepherd king's sons. He was definitely a tribe member. He was a Hyksos. And he definitely did live. He did influence the king. He lived at a time when there was a great famine. They have actually found a burial. By the way, his burial stone. Before I even get to that, they found a statue of the guy who was buried there. He has a hooked nose, and he's wearing a multicolored jacket. You remember the story of Joseph and his multicolored coat? Are you shitting me? Anyway, his gravestone was in the shape of a pyramid. Now, that's interesting because the pyramids in Egypt really are just large scales of what's called the Ben stone. It's an ancient sacred Egyptian. This was around long before the Hebrews came and hijacked it, or the Hyksos came. When they hijacked it, they gave it an entirely different meaning. It became a power symbol for them and their hijacking of Egypt. Later, Akhenaten was the one who took that same symbol now and erected it high up in the air on a pedestal, which we now call obelisks, right? The Washington Monument is one. Akhenaten was the first one to create an obelisk. At the top of that obelisk was a little pyramid-shaped stone, right? That's your Ben stone. Their symbol of power, of hijacking Egyptian power and using it to set up an empire that they're in control of. The rest of the world thinks it's an Egyptian empire. They think the Egyptians are oppressive. It's them. Just like people thought that the British were oppressive, right? It wasn't the Brits' empire. It was a Jewish-run, Rothschild-run empire. The American empire, and that's what we have
Yiddish
today.
empire, they call it.
Right. It's not American, though. It's not American at all. It's them running it. Oh, my God, this pattern over and over repeats itself. But anyway, so here's Akhenaten. He establishes his headquarters in a city that we now call Amarna. He actually called it Akhenaten was the name of it. But it was a city or a city-state within the state of Egypt, right? It was its own entity. And its symbol of power was the obelisk with the Ben stone. Well, that's very interesting, isn't it? Because today we have 3 sovereign cities that exist within sovereign nations that have as their symbol of power an obelisk. One is Washington, D.C., another one is the Vatican, and the third is what's called the City in London, which is a separate entity from the rest of London, where you have its real power center headquartered, right? And there you have an obelisk as well. They're following the same game plan that Akhenaten used in ancient Egypt. This is why you have a fascination with ancient Egyptian iconography in Freemasonry. This is why, specifically, Akhenaten is the chief man, the chief mascot, if you will, of the Rosicrucians. If you go to their headquarters over in San Jose, you'll see that everything is Akhenaten. They hold him high up on a pedestal. Why? Because he represented their first major success in world government. He ran an empire, and he didn't have to use a military to keep everybody in control and in check. He did it with the power of money. He used the Egyptians' wealth by taxing them to death and spreading the money around, buying off leaders that weren't already in bed with him. That was the model that was successful. Ultimately, Egypt kicked his ass. They finally realized what he was doing, and they kicked him out. But nevertheless, they realized, this is it. This is how we've got to do it. And so everything they've done has been to follow the game plan of Akhenaten, even establishing free city-states, just like his city of Akhenaten, right? With the goddamn, the same power symbol, you know, the obelisk with the Ben stone. And the Vatican runs the religious arm of it. London runs the financial part of it, and Washington runs the military and political arm of it. There you go. Now we can see where this all came from.
Giuliani, there's been reappropriation of Egyptian symbols with Freemasonry, but I don't know if you caught Billy Porter. Billy Porter actually wore a half tuxedo, half gown to the Oscars back in February. Did you know that he actually wore an Egyptian-inspired outfit, and he was the most glamorous person, even more glamorous than Lady Gaga, and he dressed like a pharaoh, you know, that kind of like in between the androgynous god.
Yeah. And most people have no idea. It goes right over their head. They think, oh, well, he just likes ancient Egyptian history. They have no idea what the real meaning is.
So he's a middle-aged black man, and he's considered the hot thing now. And he was being carried out by a bunch of slaves. He was carried by 6 men, and he's sitting there like with a cape on, and he has like glitter, and he has like the Egyptian eye, you know, like the eye of Lucifer on, and he has like a kind of like a butterfly thing going on where like he was living as a caterpillar in an oppressive little, I guess, you know, space. And then he came out as a beautiful butterfly, you know, the whole theme of transmitting or becoming something else or transitioning, if you would. And there's definitely reappropriation inside of Hollywood with Egypt itself. And you could even say that the pyramid is a symbol of a control system where you have the elite at the top and the slaves are at the bottom, and they deeply still believe in that system.
Yep. And, you know, you look at the back of your $1 bill. What do you have there? A pyramid with the pyramidion or the Ben stone suspended above the pyramid. It's not touching the pyramid yet. Why? Because they haven't completed their goal of world domination yet. That's their aim, is to finally put that final capstone. That capstone represents the completion of their final goal. And it all goes back once again to Akhenaten. All the imagery is wanting to resurrect the global empire that he had. And they're his offspring, right? They're, you know, the royal bloodline, the priestly bloodline, it all traces back to then. Jesus traced his royal bloodline ultimately back to then, because as I said, the real King David was a Hyksos king in Egypt. So when he traced his royal bloodline back, he was tracing it back to the Hyksos Egyptian kings. He was also, you know, he's called our high priest as well as our king, right? So he's of the priestly and the kingly bloodline. So now the rulers of the Vatican centuries later and the rulers of Europe on the European thrones were all descendants of him. It all came through his line. And here's the bulk of this country's population worshiping this Jew, this scoundrelous, power-hungry, insurrectionist Jew prick. And yes, he is a prick. I know, people would think, oh, that's blasphemy. Oh, bullshit. He was a mere human being, and a very corrupt one at that. You might want to look up Luke 19:27, where he told his disciples, go and bring those before me who won't bow and worship me as king and kill him in front of me. How loving he really was, wasn't he? I think we got a call, huh?
Sounded like a jihadi. We're going to bring in the other caller. I think we got Jan. I got him on mute. I'm going to cut him off on mute. Jan, are you there? We got Jan.
Yeah, I'm
Irvin.
here.
How are you doing, kind sir?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing well. You got a question for Charles Giuliani?
You had asked me to call in tonight.
Well, yeah, we're supposed to discuss having you on the show next month, and it'd be great to have you on. And I think that you've took a radical change of where you're going as far as your content. I don't know if you ever met Charles Giuliani before or ever heard of him before, have you?
I don't know. Maybe not. I don't remember.
Are you a radio host too, or?
Yeah, I've had my show for almost 11 years.
Oh, really? What's the name of it?
You were at RBN
Logos
too, right?
Media,
John?
formerly Gnostic Media.
Oh, I've heard of Gnostic Media, sure, yeah. So you're on RBN?
I used to be on RBN. I left there about 3 years ago.
Ah, another RBN survivor.
Yeah, well, lots of lies and shenanigans. So,
yeah. I was there 12 years ago, actually. Yeah.
Yeah, I had I stayed on there for 6 months and bailed out.
Yeah.
Lots of broken promises.
Yeah. I managed to hang out for about a year, and that was all I could take.
Understood.
You guys have actually broached a lot of the same subjects. You guys both talk about the sacred mushroom. Do you guys want to get into that a little bit?
Well, I'm really the guy, I started my show 11 years ago, heavily involved in psychedelics and writing books on them. And I launched my show initially interviewing 65 of the world's leading psychedelic experts and working on a large book project that was about 1,000 pages that I ended up not publishing because, about 2/3 of the way through the project, I realized that the whole thing was MK Ultra, that the psychedelic counterculture, Gordon Wasson, Terrence McKenna, Tim Leary, that all of this was
CIA front,
was the real MK Ultra program, and I came out exposing all of that.
Sure.
And I took a lot of flack for it, and they've, the CIA has harassed me ever since, and they don't like people. The MK Ultra and the counterculture was their darling, and they've got all of these hippies believing that, that was all blowback, and the psychedelic drugs got out of the CIA's control. And
have you ever read David McGowan's work on that? He did a hell of a good job.
Sure, I interviewed him a couple of times.
Did you? I almost had him on, but he actually died before I got a chance.
Right. Well, I interviewed him twice, and then I ended up doing a much deeper series on the subject called Music, Mind Control, and Psychobiology with Dr. Hans Utter, and we did 25 shows on it. So if you seek that out on my YouTube channel, it goes much, much deeper into the whole thing. And, McGowan kind of gave us the starting direction. And then, but his book, Scenes Inside the Canyon, really doesn't have a conclusion, what was going on. So we kind of kicked it off from there and then figured out what the real agenda was. But the music, it was music, hypersexuality, and drugs. They were literally trying to recreate the fall, and they were doing it through the promotion of the psychedelics and everything. And then you start realizing, characters like Hassani Sabah that, Timothy Leary followed and did a pilgrimage for, and Aleister Crowley and all these guys, they're all following this Hassani Sabah, who created the assassins, and he would drug his orphan victims and then promise them, a paradise with 72 virgins and yada, yada, yada.
Right.
And so they realized that they could hypnotize the youth. So Leary and all of these guys, they were occultists following after Hassani Sabah's lineage, who created the Ismaili Islamic group, and so from there, stems the assassins. But a lot of the intelligence community and et cetera follows after that Islamic line, and so we delved into all of that and uncovered that the whole thing, everybody that I was working with on this project, or nearly everyone, save a few, were intel. And so I was the one that didn't get the message. So when I figured it out, I never published the book project. And, it's sitting behind me on the shelf. I could have it ready for print in a week, but I never printed it because I realized what they were all doing. It created a fishbowl effect, seeing, 65 interviews and doing all of the editing and all of this stuff. And all of a sudden I could see the whole thing laid out. They were all occultists and, Sabbateans and all of this kind of stuff. And I was just like, wait a second, something isn't right here.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Well, I hope those efforts aren't going to, be in vain, that you're going to do something with it down the line.
Well, I guess I could publish it to expose them, but, I pretty much had to can the whole book project, which is one of several I've canned, figuring out things weren't right, later on in the project.
Yeah.
But, a 1,000-page book is pretty intensive, to say the least. I mean, we had to transcribe 65 interviews, that was over a 2-year period. And it was literally, I was months away from sending it off for print.
You might have trouble finding any, established publisher to do that. You might have to go through something like Lulu.
Yeah, you're cutting out a little bit now.
Oh, no. Is
now
this
I can
any
hear
better?
you again. Yeah, that's better.
Yeah, I don't know what's going on there. But anyway, you might have to go through Lulu or something like that. You know what I mean? They probably already have you blackballed.
Oh, yeah. Well, I'm blackballed everywhere because I didn't tote the official line, and then, it's just I've been under attack recently because in January, we decided to start looking into Islam. Everybody wants the sole focus only on Zionism and Judaism. And I covered that for 10 years, and I came across an Islamic terrorism expert, and we wanted to do a series of shows on that, and used all primary citations. And boy, did things hit the fan when we started looking into that, and that's not allowed. And then I also...
you'd be more likely to get killed by one of those fanatics than even the government itself.
Right, well, and then what I did was I decided to start going, so for decades, if not more than a century, all of these quotes have floated around from the Talmud. They're said to be from the Talmud.
Yeah.
So I sat down over a 2.5, 3 month period and started checking all of them. And a third of them were made up entirely. And about 2/3 of them were misquoted and intentionally taken out of context. And so going through all of that, that was a real eye-opener for me. And, of course, I was labeled as a Zionist, a Jew, a sellout, a Mossad agent, an FBI agent, all manner.
Fathom that they themselves would put those quotes out there for that very reason.
What's that?
They themselves would put those false quotes out there to discredit people that are really...
Yeah, well, and they're trying to create a genocide. So I started checking all of these quotes, and, so 1 or 2 out of 60 that I've checked so far were correct. And the other, and I'm still verifying 1, and I've came across some more I'm going to probably check too, but the other 58 or 59 were all false or taken out of context. And so then what I started doing was I would take the same ideas and I started searching through Islamic texts to see if I could find them there. And within 2 days, well, it took me almost 3 months to check them all in the Talmud and in Judaism. Within 2 days, I was able to verify 75% of them in the Islamic texts.
Oh, it's definitely an abomination. I've done quite a few shows on Islam, and just the quotes in there alone that praise Israel. It amazes me, because there's so many Muslims that are supposed to be against Israel, but yet if they read their own Quran, they should be kissing Israel's ass.
Well, the Quran also says that they have to kill the kafir and the Christians and the Jews, etc. So that's, there's abrogation and all of this stuff that they use. They, they'll talk about Christians being of the book in one line, and then a couple chapters later, it's we got to kill the Christians.
The infidel. Oh yeah. Classic contradictory bullshit like you get with the Bible.
Well, the New Testament is very non-contradictory. It's all logos when you understand what it's based on. The Old Testament is more law, and I used to agree with you that it's contradictory bullshit. But what's that?
The New Testament is a contradiction of the Old across the board.
Well, not really a contradiction in a way. What he's doing is he's closing out the Pharisees and saying, follow Logos instead of following the hypocrisy of the Pharisees. But you still need to understand the Old Covenant to understand the place of the New Covenant.
Yeah, let me ask you. You sound like a Christian, right?
I became a Christian in 2017. I started out to debunk it and changed my mind that I was wrong.
Yeah, that explains it. Well, you might.
Well, we don't need any, appeals to ridicule or that explains it. I mean, you got to sit down and read it through what it means and
that.
Through.
No,
what's that?
I read it. I digested it. I ate it for lunch, breakfast, and supper.
Really? So do you grasp what Logos is? Do you understand that it's all about living in truth and honor, and that Jesus or Logos is truth incarnate?
There's enough time in the whole rest of this night, never mind the rest of this show, for me to elaborate on that. But that book has...
Well, it's your argument that you're saying it's wrong, so why wouldn't you elaborate your own argument?
Nothing to offer. Well, you said it doesn't contradict itself. It contradicts itself.
Well, I was an atheist and agnostic for years, and I even wrote books attacking the Bible, and I sat down and actually studied it and understood it through... I'm not asking you to interrupt me. I'm just explaining myself. I looked at it through the eyes of Logos and truth, and I understood what it was. If you didn't grasp it, like it says, many will not, that's up to you. But I got it the next time I went through it.
I come at it from the premise that, Jesus may have existed, and so I'll argue from what the New Testament says to show that Jesus contradicted himself and that essentially what he taught is bullshit. But there isn't really even any hardcore evidence.
So living in truth is bullshit? Is that what you're saying?
His version of truth is bullshit. Have you?
How is that? Do you have any examples, or are you just stating that?
Have you sold
Jan, it's actually like news to me that you're a Christian. I don't think a lot of truth.
Well, if you noticed on my website over a year ago, I changed it to Logos Media. So what would that tell you?
Yeah, I know. I got into the business and started doing my own thing, but I used to be listening to your show back in 2016, 15-ish. And I just got so taken up
I used to have this co-host on my show that used to publish all of this BS, about it. And I got rid of him, and I actually sat down and started studying everything in heavy detail on my own and realized what Logos really is. When you get that Logos is truth, where we get reason and logic from, then you start to grasp what it is. How is logic bullshit? How is following truth bullshit?
Hold on. Where's the reason and logic in love your enemies, turn the other cheek, sell everything you have and come and follow me, hate your mother, father, sister, and brother so you can come and follow me?
Hate your father, mother, sister, and brother.
Yeah.
Okay, you're going to have to cite specific citations. It sounds like you're mishmashing a whole lot there.
No.
Taking it out of context.
Better than that. If you email me at truthhertzradio@aol.com, spell Hertz, Hertz, I'll send.
And also, turn the other cheek also had originally to do with people used to wipe with their left hand and stuff like that. So this is what this was about. But there's a whole other context there that you can look up.
Yeah. Well, you know what? You're not going to be able to defend this book once you read what I've written.
Well, I've read and wrote books against it for decades. I've read just about every contrary position out there on it.
I thought I did too.
Hey guys, it's not a dick measuring contest. Hold on one second. Jan, let me ask you a question. Jan,
go ahead.
You're the expert at cultural revolutions. Like, like from what I've read from your work, you know a lot about it. Do you think that Jesus Christ himself launched a cultural revolution back 2,000 years?
Oh, I think what he did was he realized what the Pharisees were doing and came out against it and got people to follow truth directly rather than following the legalese of the Pharisees.
Do you know what he wanted?
What did he want?
He wanted them to follow Moses. He upheld Moses constantly. Unless they believe Moses and the prophets, they won't believe, even though one rises.
So you don't like the 10 Commandments? Is that what you're saying?
I don't like Moses. Moses was a mass murdering, frickin' guerrilla warfare psychopath.
What is Christianity about? Like Saul to Paul. Isn't that someone who comes to terms and lives in truth and repents?
Well, you got to read my book. Let me tell you why. Hold on. I was a believer like you, okay? I was actually going into the ministry. In fact, I worked in the ministry for 8 years, not as an ordained minister, but as a lay pastor. And then for my 4 years while I was in college studying for the ministry, I worked as a student pastor.
Okay.
So I have 8 years of pastoral experience.
Well, how come you can't cite any specific citations? To me, it sounds like you never grasped what Logos was.
Jan, that would take the whole night, and he doesn't have those notes right in front of him.
Well, it's his arguments. He has the onus of proof to back his own statement.
It wasn't supposed to turn into an argument.
You will see in my book thousands of citations. Every single page has dozens.
And they're all to primary citations? Are you citing it to second, third-hand sources?
Well, let me finish what I was saying. I was a believer just like you, a diehard believer. I gave Bible studies. I conducted prayer meetings every single week, sometimes every day.
Okay, I wasn't asking for your accolades. I was asking for your evidence.
Well, hold on. No, there isn't enough time. There's no way there's enough time. I'm going to give you the evidence.
So you're just going to brag about how long you did it, but not provide any sources.
I'm telling you that I believed it like you are believing it now. I don't believe it anymore.
Take care, gentlemen. Have a great night.
Why? Can you guess why? Yeah. And this is what you get. This is what you get from believers. I have no use for him. Sorry, I don't. I'm not even interested in reading anything he's written or hearing anything he has to say in a show. People like that just annoy the living shit out of me. I gave him my email address. I guarantee you he will never contact me. He will not want to read my book because he doesn't want to hear it. Religious people use religion as a crutch. They don't even care deep down inside if it's true or not. They built their life around it. They have their close circle of friends who believe it like they do. And to give it up will mean that their whole world will collapse from underneath them. He might even have a girlfriend who's a Christian, and he's afraid he'll lose her if he gives it up. So for him to ask me to give proof is very dishonest because he knows darn well there's only 10, 15 minutes left of the show. There's no way you can even do that. I offered him my book, which would give him the proof, but of course, he doesn't want to read it. What does he do? He hangs up. Why would you hang up if what you have is the best message for all mankind? It's our only hope. It's all you ever need to live a happy and peaceful life, not only in this world, but for the endless ages to come. If what he had was so great to offer, why would he hang up? I should be the one to hang up, right? If I don't have anything really to offer and I can't refute what he's saying and he's got the truth, I should be the one to hang up, right? No, he hangs up because what he has to offer. And if he's listening, I hope he calls back in and be a man. Don't be a little wimp and crybaby and run away and hide in the corner. If you've got something to offer, call back in and share what you've got to offer. He's telling me the onus of proof is on me. No, it isn't. It's on you. You prove that your Jesus even existed. Then from there, you've got to prove that your book, the Bible, is worthy of me paying attention to when it's filled with contradictions that you're obviously either not aware of or you're sweeping under the rug. But in my book, in the first 4 chapters, I spend the first 110 pages of that book documenting mounds and mounds and mounds of contradictions from both an Old and New Testament. I show from the pages of the Bible itself that you can't trust that book because it says one thing 1 minute and another the next. I'm not talking about just doctrinal contradictions. That's bad. I'm talking about the very storyline of Christ, what he did, what he said, what happened to him, and who showed up at the tomb, how many people or angels were supposed to be at the tomb, what angels spoke, what Mary said, what it's all contradictory. You go from one gospel to the next. Matthew says one thing, Luke says another, Mark says another, John says another, and you cannot harmonize any two of them, let alone all four. They're all going off in different directions. The story is bullshit. But of course, he could not handle sitting around long enough to hear that.
I'd actually recommend anybody to buy Giuliani's book, What is Wrong with the Bible. It just came out in September
Hell, you don't even have to
2018.
buy it. I'll send it to him for free. Just email me, truthhertzradio@aol.com. Spell Hertz, Hertz. I'll be happy to send it to you for free. If you wanted printed version, yeah, you can go to Amazon, but I'll send you the digital version for free. And I dare anyone listening out there, I challenge and dare you to come back to me and tell me that you still believe in the Bible after reading this book. I'm not trying to destroy people's hope. I'm trying to get you to stop following horse shit, stand on your own 2 feet, and be a man or be a woman, and don't let yourself be led like a horse with a bit in its mouth, because that's all that book does. It exploits people. It leads you to a cult that will drain your pockets dry and fill you with fairy tales that you'll never know are a lie until after you're dead, and it won't matter then, will it? But they'll have you believing till your grave that you've got some hope in Jesus. I'm not saying there's no hope beyond this life, but don't put your hopes in falsehoods. The book is a lie, and who gave it to us? The Jews. I rest my case.
Giuliani, very good statement you just made. We've actually had a couple of debates on my program before. We've actually had parliamentary style where everybody's given a timer to talk. And I think it would be constructive for you and Jan to debate if you're willing to do so. We're going to do it
any day, you name it. I hope I didn't create any waves between you and him. I know you guys, I guess, are friends, and that's just a sore spot for me. I have no tolerance for the ignorance of religious people. And it is ignorance. I know it's ignorance because I was a colossal ignoramus myself. And I know where he's coming from. I feel bad for him. I do. But this is another problem. One of the best proofs that Christianity is a fraud. It's not even, you don't have to open the Bible. Just look at how Christians respond. They get angry. They get that tone in their voice. Why don't they say, my dear brother, wait, let me show you why. Let me explain to you. Jesus is our hope. There's no love. They get angry right away. Do I get angry? Yes, of course I do, but I'm not professing to be a godly person. These godly people should be able to prove the efficacy of their religion by their actions, by their tone. They never do. They get angry, they get on the defensive, and what does he do? He hangs up. Classic. Why? If he's got something great to share, didn't he want to stay on the line? When I was a believer, I would never have hung up on someone like me. I would have, because I believed so strongly in it, I would have stuck around hoping that I can change the sinner who's on his way to hell. If he loves me so much and wants me to be saved in Jesus' kingdom, that's supposed to be his prime directive, right? Why wouldn't he want all the more to talk to someone like me? Why? If he could bring me back to Jesus, that would be one of his greatest triumphs. What a trophy he could display. What a witness that would be to others, to bring them to Jesus. This guy was a non-believer, and I was able to bring him back to Jesus. Why would he turn around, pull an about face, and run in the other direction? It's sad. It really is. He would argue, well, I couldn't get a word in edgewise. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. If he talked in a soft tone, it would have calmed me down. And, we could have had a rational discussion, and then he could have started to share what he claimed was his wonderful faith. But they're not into that. They just want to, convince you that they're right. And based on what? Your position is right. Have you looked into the logos? You ask another preacher, and they'll have some other magic buzzword that he'll use. I don't give a shit. The book does not stand up to close scrutiny, and my book proves that. It does, and it proves it from the pages of the Bible itself. It's not my opinion. It's stuff you can go and look up and read for yourself and see, oh my God, this guy isn't kidding. The Bible does contradict itself. It isn't reliable. This God is a psychopath. He's commanding murder on every page. Jesus is a psychopath. He told his disciples to go kill those who wouldn't worship him and in front of him. He didn't just say, go out and kill him. Bring him in front of me and kill him in front of me. Holy shit, that's a raging psychopath. That someone was supposed to emulate. You call that the truth, Jan, if you're listening? That's the truth? Someone who would make a statement like that? How about this? Jesus talked about getting castrated for the sake of the kingdom of heaven. Those who can receive it, let them do so. I wonder if Jan's been castrated, Rollie. You think so? I doubt it.
Well, he has this thing where he feels like the truth community's turned his back on him, and he ran troll interference on you, and he would ask you a multitude of questions. If you try to answer one of them, he tried to change the question he was asking you. Like, what's your background?
In all honesty, though, he can't help himself. That's what Bible believers do. You know, that's what they do. That's just how they are. They really don't have anything to hang on. All they can offer you is feelings and emotions. It makes me feel good. Well, yeah, I can go to a freaking bar and have a few beers with some friends and say that makes me feel good. And so the bar is my church, and I can say that beer is my God, right? But, is beer really going to make my life better? It makes me feel good, maybe. But, is it going to bring me eternal life? And, feelings and emotions don't amount to truth. And that's all they can offer. You go and listen to testimonies if you go to church sometime and, people go up and, Jesus did this for me. Jesus did that for me. Oh, bullshit. You were in the right place at the right time. You played the right number and you won the lottery. You think Jesus did that for you? In the meantime, there's a poor guy sitting in the back pew whose family is dying from starvation because he lost his job and can't fucking make ends meet. Where's Jesus for him? You know what I mean? God damn it. I'm so sick of it. It's nothing but pure fucking hypocrisy. And then in the meantime, the minister drives away in a fucking Cadillac because he's living the high life, getting a big fat salary. Yeah, he can really talk about how Jesus blesses him, can he?
The prosperity gospel.
Yeah, there you go. There's another example of shit that they'll pull out of their hat. Oh, yeah, that proves it right there. You're successful because you know the right people, and that amounts to Jesus blessing you. Give me a fucking break. But they never take into consideration, though, the poor among them, that obviously Jesus isn't blessing. How do they account for that? You know what they'll say? Well, God is testing his faith. Or maybe he's hiding a secret sin. What a crock. So now the person who isn't getting his prayers answered, now he becomes responsible. It's not God's responsibility. It's not the religion's responsibility. That's not what's at fault. It's the person himself. You see how they can write everything off no matter what you throw at them. They'll come up with this sleazy cookie cutter excuse to fit into their little, scenario. It's all bullshit. Would it be nice if there was this magic genie? We could rub the lamp and he would pop out. We could ask him for things. Oh, fuck yeah. I'd be the first one to sign up for it if there was any goddamn truth to it. There isn't. I prayed for 41 years of my life, alone, in the company of others, publicly, privately, you name it. Prayed for everything under the sun, and I can look back and tell you, I never had any of my fucking prayers answered. Never. My mother prayed till her dying day. Did she get rescued from osteoporosis and irritable bowel syndrome, which ultimately killed her? No, none of her prayers ever get answered. All she wanted in life was to have a man that loved her and cared for her. My father left her when I was 5. She had a boyfriend that left her, about 15 years after that. He stuck around for a while, but he turned out to be a fucking asshole too. All she wanted was a loving, caring man in her life. She prayed and prayed. It never happened. No man ever came into her life that genuinely cared for her and didn't treat her like a piece of shit. And yet she died still a believer. I didn't have the heart to tell her. I didn't fucking, well, I mean, she knew I wasn't a believer, but I didn't press it. You know what I mean? I didn't want her to know what I knew because I didn't want to ruin that for her. It made her happy. You know what I'm saying? But it's all bullshit. It never did a thing for her. She thought it did, because just like me, if I have a few beers, it makes me feel good, right? But it really isn't doing anything for me in the real world. Neither does religion. It doesn't do a fucking thing for you in the real world. It just makes you feel good like a beer. Well, why don't you drink a fucking beer? At least the beer won't lie to you. The beer won't put you in a false sense of security. Well, it might do that. If you get drunk enough. Might make you feel good. But it's all false. You want to go through life with something like that? You want to live a lie? That's what religion is. It's a fucking lie. I wish it were true. Like I said, it would be nice, wouldn't it? But it isn't. So I'm not going to pretend something is true because I want it to be. That's what Christians are doing. I think a lot of them actually don't even believe it deep down inside. But they found a niche in life where they feel comfortable and they got a close circle of friends they can hang out with. It's a social club environment, And there's others of like-mindedness. They have, seemingly high moral standards, although I'll argue that the Bible standards aren't even moral. He asked me if I like the 10 Commandments. Oh, give me a break. I guarantee you he doesn't keep the Sabbath. That's one of those 10 Commandments. Christians conveniently ignore that one. So don't even give me the shit that you believe in the fucking 10 Commandments. No, you don't. Got the shit. But as if the 10 Commandments actually have some special meaning to them, you know? Every one of those had been believed, well, the last 6 that pertain to our relationship with our fellow man, have been believed by all cultures all through history. They were around long before the alleged time of Moses. You know, not killing, that's just common sense. If you want to have a society that runs orderly, you don't want people killing you, and you don't want to be killing others either. If you're going to kill others, they're going to want to kill you. If you want society to run properly, then, yeah, believing in not killing is a good thing, isn't it? Believing in not stealing is a good thing. Unless you want others to steal from you, don't be stealing from them. And on it goes. There's nothing profound about that fucking law. Nothing. It's all plagiarism. The Code of Hammurabi had all those commandments long before the fucking Old Testament was ever written down. Jesus Christ, man. Anyway, I don't mean to go on that rant. I hope that didn't ruin the show.
No, I think it was a good show, very constructive today. At least to introduce my audience to somebody as seasoned and veteran as you are, to come on my show, and I really do appreciate you coming on. I got my caller on the other line, and I'm going to let him make his closing statement before he gets off the line. Johnny, do you want to make a closing statement before we get Giuliani to make his?
Yeah, just a quick one. Not talking about everything that just happened, but just to get back to the original episode. When you were talking about the Jews and everything, I really am interested on that perspective. We understand that putting the face behind that, I asked you that earlier. I found it very interesting when you talked about your friend having paraphernalia with the Jewish Star of David on there. Just to talk about World War II and the Jews and everything, the question would be is, what do you think about the Jews? Do the Jews really own the Catholic Church? Because you see the pictures of World War II and Hitler meeting up with all the Catholic bishops. Was that the infiltration of the Jews coming into World War II and Hitler taking that money?
I'm not sure exactly what you mean, but
we knew that he was working with the Catholic Church. We have the pictures. He was working with some popes, but just to put a face behind the Jews is what I was trying to ask. You had mentioned the artifact that your friend had.
Well,
so I found that very amusing.
Yeah. I know what you're saying. There was a lot of contention within the Catholic Church up until 1965, the Vatican II Council. What happened then was, and a lot of Catholics today, the conservative Catholics, reject Vatican II. I have a friend who's one of them, and he thinks that every pope since Vatican II has been, of the devil. Well, in a sense, I agree with what he's saying. The change that he might not realize took place then is there was a complete hijacking by the P2 Lodge of the Vatican at that time, so that now the Vatican is totally in line with what I call the third faction, these secret societies. Prior to that time, there was a lot of resistance. The Vatican wouldn't allow, and in fact, technically it's still in the books that they don't allow Catholics to become Masons, even though the top brass of the Vatican now are all Masons. But they still have to maintain the illusion of consistency, so they still have that teaching on the books, but it's bullshit because, again, the hypocrisy of it. But yes, prior to 1965, there was still a lot of contention because these were two different Jewish rival factions vying for power. The Vatican resented that this third faction had taken so much control away from them that they completely removed the royal bloodline from power, right? They're essentially non-existent. I mean, they're there just for token reasons, but they have no power anymore. And they had greatly reduced the power in Rome. One of their puppets, what's his name? Napoleon there. When he marched into France in 1798, he took the then reigning Pope, Pius VI, captive, and he later died in captivity in France. That was a deadly blow to the Catholic Church. And, they never fully recovered from that. That their power was greatly reduced. When the world saw that it was possible to hijack the Vatican like that and take God's head man, the Pope, captive and have him die, a lot of people lost faith in the Catholic Church. That told them that, wow, they don't have the divine power that we thought. So that was a big blow, but still they didn't have complete control yet until Vatican II. So yeah, that's, now they control the Vatican, they control the royal bloodline, all the kings, the emperor, the royal families. They control the prime ministers, the presidents, and of course.
Would you agree that that's the Jews' republic? Is the Catholic Church now? It's almost like an establishment that you really can't blame anybody when it comes to the Jew in particular because of religion. And the Catholic knows the old Roman stuff. They preach the sun religion, so they know a lot about all these fractions. Do you believe that the Jews really have control over maybe the Catholic Church? You were mentioning how they worked hand in hand with the royal family.
The Catholic religion is not typical Christianity by any means. The Catholic religion is actually the old Atenist religion under a Christian garb. The Vatican, like I said, has the obelisk right there in St. Peter's Square, surrounded by an old solar disc, on the ground, that wheel, the solar wheel. You look at all their saints, right? Those saints are nothing but pagan Roman gods. The pagan Romans had every day dedicated to one god or another. When the Catholic Church came along, they took those same gods and just gave them Christian names. But every day of the Catholic calendar,
it was paganism.
Right.
Yeah,
and those saints are portrayed the same way. They have the halo behind them, just like the ancient pagan gods had, right? The Catholics practice, this idea of transubstantiation. That when they eat the bread, they're eating Christ's flesh, and drink the wine, they're drinking his blood. That's actually not the communion service that Christ established. That's the pagan version of it. That came from Akhenaten in Egypt, where they made round wafers. The Catholic wafer is round, right? It even used to have IHS stamped on it. And they claimed that, that's the first three letters in the Greek for Jesus. That's true, but that's not where it originated. The ancient Akhenaten religion actually had IHS stamped on their round wafers, which stood for the Egyptian Trinity, Isis, Horus, and Seth. So, the whole thing is purely Akhenaten. It's not, quote, Christian at all. There's nothing Christian about it. The statue.
Well, I hope you're on more. I hope you're on more. I have a few questions. Maybe if Rollie has you on later on, because you really do get into the historical point of take on that. So I do appreciate that.
Yeah,
so thank you very much.
Yeah, you bet. I guess we've run out of time. We're actually at the overtime here.
Yeah, we did. A lot of our listeners on the East Coast, it's hard for them to stay up past midnight, and I know that's where you're at too.
Yeah.
But Charlie, I think this is the beginning of a very good thing, and I do appreciate you coming on my show. It was a good show. I think it was very productive all in all.
Yeah, definitely. Like I said, sorry for getting hot under the collar. That's just a very sore spot for me. I guess if I was going to end everything off with one statement, I would just say, be wary of everything Jewish. And since that Bible is as Jewish as you can get, that alone, and as a matter of fact, Rollie, that's what did it for me. That was the final thing that did it for me. I had my faith crushed already. I didn't give up on my faith in the Bible, but my faith had a severe blow dealt to it because of a lot of things that went wrong in my life, but I still clung. The final thing that opened my mind to the possibility that maybe that book isn't what I thought it was. Maybe I need to take a critical look at it because I never did that before. All my years of studying it consisted of studying it as a believer and looking for things in it that could substantiate my belief, but I never looked at it critically. Once I looked at it critically, that's when the whole thing fell apart. But what inspired me to do that was finding out about our little Jewish friends and how they've had a long history of sabotaging this planet. And so I went into it with this question. I still hope the Bible can be shown to be God's word, but I want to see if I can see anything in it that can substantiate my suspicions that this book might have been their creation. Well, I knew it was written by them, but their creation for the purpose of exploiting the masses, the Gentiles, lying to us. And one of the first things I started finding out was Old Testament passages that talked about a future promised Jew world order, where Yahweh told his chosen ones, I will bring all nations before you. They will bow before you and lick the dust from the soles of your feet. That did it for me right there. And everything I found out since then just backed up my initial suspicions. But when I saw that, I realized this book isn't against this new world order. It's all for it. The initial groundwork for it was laid by the God of the Bible himself. Whether you believe he exists or not doesn't matter. If he exists, he's the devil himself. And he's the one that laid the whole game plan out, telling them there are multitudes of passages like that. The one I just cited is from the book of Isaiah, but they're all over the place in the Old Testament. The Jew world order was laid out by Yahweh. He promised he would give the world to them. You shall rule over them. They shall not rule over you. On and on and on. My jaw just dropped when I saw this, and I couldn't believe I never saw it before.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that you would clean this guy's clock, like throw the kitchen sink at him and debate.
Yeah, I
if we could get down.
I got the bigger dick type of thing. No, it has nothing to do with that.
I know.
I hate that book. I hate it with a passion, and I can't stand hearing people defend it. I know that he means well, and he does not know this stuff, I can tell, because he wasn't even aware of contradictions. They're all over the damn place. I wasn't aware of it either. So I feel bad for the guy. I do. But I admit it. I don't have patience with Bible believers. I don't. And I don't even want to try to have patience with them because I'm so disgusted with that book. I fucking hate it. I use it for toilet paper. Quite literally, actually. I have used Bible pages for toilet paper. Once I found out what a piece of shit it was, I pulled out an old Bible and used it to wipe my ass. Quite happily so, actually. I felt good about that. Anyway.
I actually had Jim Fetzer on my show to debate Steve Dayak, and I'm going to send you a copy of that. We're going to actually have a parliamentary style debate, and there's going to be like a 10-minute clock where you get your 10 minutes unprecedented, no interruptions to make your point, and then he gets 10 minutes to counter. And we'll have a good debate going. If Jan, I really respect you.
If he's willing. Honestly, I highly doubt it, but if he is, sure. And remind him, my book's available. You can email me, truthhertzradio@AOL.com.
It will be in 2 weeks at least, maybe a month's time for this to happen. So both gentlemen could get well prepared for it. I do got a guest next week.
I'm not even going to prepare. I don't need to. I'm ready to go right now if he wants.
Yeah, maybe we could do it in 2 weeks then. Well, Charles Giuliani, thank you so very much for the time that you gave to us and shared with us. And we do appreciate you coming on tonight, and I definitely appreciate it. You gave me a platform tonight, coming on and in sharing your wealth of knowledge. It's really a pool of endless streams of intellect.
Yeah, it's been great. Appreciate it. Enjoyed it.
All right. Well, thank you, audience, for listening to Blackballed with Rollie Quaid right here on Revision Media. Like every good thing, it has to come to an end, and I will be back here next night. God bless, and don't forget me on Patreon and PayPal and Bitcoin, and have a good night, people.
How to invent a religion.
I always knew you had to be willing to die to even do this job.
Executive orders.
The creation and the maintenance of a secret government within our government.
Is something wrong? What? With anything?
I feel like you want to rip your face off.
There's something wrong with anything.
I was so spun.
What's the most you ever lost in the coin toss?
The law of the jungle.
The most you ever lost in the coin toss? You don't know what you're talking about. Who said it? I said it. You don't know what you're talking about.
Suppression of unrest and dissent. Domestic anti-terrorism.